With that, we bring on Nick Wright, who vacationed, when you have a show with an unlimited budget, the hosts have an unlimited budget. This guy's...
Oh, I know you're not talking about vacation. Here's where I didn't vacation to, Colin. One of my mini vacation homes. And raise your hand if you can say that. Oh, I'm the only one with a hand up? By the way, I was just about to compliment you. You had 2 all-time lines there. Did you just make up the guy who made the train is not as fascinating as the guy who jumped over the train?
Yeah.
Was that? I've never heard that before. Yeah. I also don't know that I'm familiar with jumping over trains, but you put it perfectly. Like I was like, I've never heard. I Googled it while listening. I was like, is that like a saying? That was great. I really enjoyed that. That was really good. How are you?
Well, we're starting off at a good foot. So, it's funny about the quarterback coach thing. Russell Wilson, there was a moment when Sean Payton said, "Stop kissing babies. You're not running for office." And that was the moment I thought, this isn't going to work. This is like Tebow and Greg Williams, the former defensive coordinator who's all ego and brash. Like sometimes personalities don't work. But I do think Russell should be thankful, and I'll lay this out briefly. He was viewed by a lot of people as washed. He had 1 fewer touchdown pass than Mahomes last year. The same number of total touchdowns as Lamar. He was viewed as cringy, expensive, and washed, and he's not now. He's got a market now. Could I not argue, you can say whatever you want about Peyton and his blunt, kind of raw personality, but Russell was largely done in the eyes. It was considered, that contract, a disaster. And now somebody may get him for free.
Well, yeah, so I think I disagree with you here in this regard. I think the only reason Russ has a market is because he might play for the minimum. Because of the way the contract with the Broncos works out is he's going to make $39 million next year no matter what. So it's in his interest to have his future employer pay him as little as possible because the Broncos have to foot the rest of the bill. I agree with you that I think Sean Payton got the most you could get out of him. I disagree with you that all of a sudden he's going to have a robust market. I think he will land somewhere in a quarterback competition. I don't think he's a guaranteed day one starter, and I don't think that right now, if he was in the position Kirk Cousins is in, where it's like, hey, I'm a free agent, how much do people want to pay me? There would be a real market for him, but because there's going to be fewer quarterbacks than there are teams that need him, and he's going to play for the league minimum because his money's the same, I think he'll land somewhere. But the fact that the Broncos would rather take the biggest dead cap hit by a factor of 2 in league history to move off him, I don't think that necessarily helps his status. But I do agree that last year Sean Payton got the most you could get out of, at this point, a limited player.
It's as somebody that grew up in the Northwest, you kind of like the teams you grew up with. And I do think there's a case to be made that for about 8 years, 2 things happened with Russell Wilson. Pete Carroll's legacy was fired twice, 7-9, 7-9. Russell arrived and kind of changed the entire franchise as much as Pete and Marshawn Lynch and Richard Sherman did. For 8 years, he also got a lot of guys drafted that were undersized. So he's not going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I doubt that very seriously. But I do think it's easy to dump on him. I think mobile quarterbacks, Cam, Donovan, McNabb come to mind, who are kind of average in the pocket, but exceptional out of the pocket, age quickly. That's why I like Kyler Murray, who I actually think is great in the pocket and out of the pocket. But what is your legacy for Russ? I do see him as a guy that had for about 8 years a remarkable career and got other guys drafted.
So I agree with a lot of that. I also think that people are doing a little revisionist history in a negative, unfair sense when they're doing the, oh, how good was he ever actually? No, he was pretty damn good very quickly. Yeah. His rookie season, people should go back and look at that playoff game against Atlanta. They ended up losing that game. He had a 20-point second-half comeback or an 18-point second-half comeback that then got trumped in the end by a late Falcons field goal. The next year, they, of course, win the Super Bowl. The next year, again, he played really poorly in that NFC title game against Green Bay, but did hit the throw in overtime to put them in the Super Bowl before. So I think we're being unfair to act like, okay, it was always exclusively Legion of Doom, Marshawn Lynch. No, Russell Wilson's ability to extend plays, and to this day, what he's still excellent at, I think at this point it's the only thing he's excellent at, is the almost lollipop deep ball accuracy. When he had that combined with the mobility, no, he was very good. So I agree with all of that. Here's the other side of Russ's legacy, which is the damage you can do by, I don't want to say believing in yourself too much, because that sounds awful.
Yeah.
But Russ all of a sudden, and there were great stories written about it, and it was the Super Bowl between Brady and Mahomes. And Russ was in the commissioner's box sitting next to Roger Goodell at that Super Bowl. And it seemed like, and he talked about how he wanted to, be where those guys are and be an MVP candidate and be able to guy that could call his own plays. And he wanted more than at that point he was able to handle. And I think that really was the beginning of the end for him. He wasn't satisfied with where he was, which sometimes can be good, but sometimes can also lead to what it led to, which is his ugly exit from Seattle and then this really disastrous tenure in Denver.
So I want to talk LeBron James. So by and large, I've been I think when you're a public figure forever, I mean, we've seen Belichick's legacy go from here to, right? Like the dynasty's not helping matters. So I think anybody, I don't care if it's a politician, I don't care if it's a basketball player or a talk show host. If you're in front of the camera for 30 years, you're going to get dinged. So there's times that LeBron says, leave my son alone. And I think, LeBron, you're the one that foisted him up there. Nobody was talking about your son. You wanted to play with him. You said he could be a Laker. That's kind of on you. But I do think, and I did defend him when he did the press conference and went to Miami. I did not think it was the end of the world. It may have been clunky, turbulent, but it wasn't the end of the world. And I want to ask you, I look at 40,000 points. And I said this last week when you were globetrotting. I said that a 40,000 point, you can no longer compare Michael and LeBron. Like Mahomes, you can look at it and go, he does a lot of things. He does a lot of things Tom can't do. So I don't have a problem with that discussion percolating, Tom Patrick.
Sure.
But I'm not sure what Michael can do now that LeBron can't. Like distance,
well, he can
shooting.
Rely on his myth makers. I mean, listen, So I got very frustrated with my dear friend Chris Broussard yesterday on television, and we try not to do the GOAT debates. We treat the GOAT debate like a peppermint frappuccino. It's great once or twice a year, but if you don't want to have it back-to-back days, you can't be like, let's roll it out. But occasionally it really hits the spot. And yesterday was one of those days.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Because Brew made the point, and he's not wrong, that typically in sports, we value peak more than longevity.
True.
And I understand that to a degree, but it is to me more of a tapestry. Like, you could argue Randy Moss's peak was higher than Jerry Rice's, but the longevity is so overwhelming, no one argues that Moss was actually better than Rice. The LeBron versus Michael peak is an argument. It's what you can make the case for Michael, you can make the case for LeBron. I would argue the best single year either one of them ever had was LeBron in 2013. League MVP, Finals MVP, 27-game winning streak, 3 votes away from Defensive Player of the Year. I think that's the best single season.
I agree.
I know Michael won Defensive Player of the Year and MVP in the same season, but that year was 89. They didn't even make the conference finals, let alone the NBA finals. So or win the championship. So 1-year peak, I think it's LeBron. You could argue it's Michael. 2-year peak, LeBron in 12-13 versus Michael in 91-92 or 96-97. Call that a coin flip. 3-year peak is Michael. 4-year, like the peak stuff goes back and forth. Yeah. The longevity is a 10-7 round. The longevity is not close.
Right.
The longevity is a joke. The Michael Jordan, and this is where I get frustrated. And you guys can maybe show the tweet, because it'll be very easy to find, because it was all over social media yesterday, of the AP article when Michael Jordan as a Wizard got to 30,000 points. He was the 4th guy to do it. They stopped the game. They gave him a trophy the size of the Larry O'Brien. Meanwhile, Wilt, Malone, Kareem already had been there. Nobody cared. So when Michael got to 30,000, was the 4th guy, they're like, oh, my God, that's why he's the GOAT. LeBron gets to 40,000, gets a brief standing ovation, and what does the internet say? Oh, my, you're going to act like this is a big deal. Yeah, we're going to act like it's a big deal. We're going to act like when somebody does something, that if from this moment forward, Colin, Wembanyama averaged 35 points a game every year for 15 straight years, he wouldn't have 40,000 points. So, yeah, when a guy is the best teenager ever, when a guy is the best 20-year-old, 21-year-old, 22-year-old ever, and now he is the best old guy ever, when that guy is doing it and people are like, it's compiling, it would be compiling if he averaged 11 points a night.
Yeah.
He's averaging 25 again. So, yeah, I think it matters, and I think the fact that when folks try to poke at him, they're like, you know what? That press conference he gave in 2011 after the finals loss sure was bad. I was in college when that happened. Like, give me a break. And so, maybe not quite in college, but yeah, so there you go. There's your peppermint frappuccino, Colin.
That's one of your better analogies ever. And as somebody who's done a few analogies, I'd steal that if you wouldn't have said it publicly. It was very good. So,
I appreciate that.
I have been higher on the Celtics than you during this run, but I got on this thing yesterday with Chris Mannix, and he was apoplectic. He could barely get on set. He was trembling. I said, I'm starting to feel a little bit like...
He's probably wearing his Celtics pajamas, old Mannix. Mannix, my buddy Mannix, who still has the tweet up, would you trade Giannis for Brad Stevens? I wouldn't. I love Mannix, but that exists out there, Chris. Go ahead, sorry.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I said,
go ahead.
Boston's getting into a Buffalo Bills feel where it's like, okay, I know Jim Kelly and Josh Allen are good. I'm not denying they're Hall of Famers, and Jason Tatum's great, but I don't feel he's a top 4 to 5 player, and there's somebody else in the league now, Denver, and I don't see Buffalo getting through Kansas City, who will be better next year, or Boston getting through Denver, which has more length, which doesn't have really an injury-prone guy like a Porzingis in the starting 5. And I said with Boston, they have to win this year. The Knicks are going to go get a number 2 in the offseason. Right. Embiid's coming back. Giannis may go to somebody else in the East, or they'll make another move. Denver's going nowhere. Lakers are probably going to go get a scoring guard somewhere. They'll get rid of D'Lo. Again, the Warriors want to make a move for Giannis, which is very possible if they get jettisoned early in the playoffs. And I said, this is the year. I don't want to hear about it. Like, Kansas City was vulnerable this year. Young. Buffalo didn't beat them. It's like, I'm sorry. Am I unrealistic?
The Celtics have to win.
Yes.
No, the Celtics have to win. They have to win. And listen, now it's not fair to compare a team with the proud history of the Celtics to the Bills. I mean, the Celtics do, as we all know, have won championship since the fall of the Berlin Wall. I mean, give me a break. I mean, I get it, guys. They won a bunch of titles, you know what I mean, during pre-Nixon administration, but in the last 35 seasons, they're dead even with the Raptors. So I have pumped the brakes on Titletown a bit, Boston. However, what I will tell you is this. They are 7 games clear of the field. while I agree with you, Tatum is not obviously Jokic or Giannis, their starting five is the best in basketball. If the worst guy in your starting five is either Drew or Kristaps, you have an amazing starting five. They are healthy. They are defending. They are scoring. I say all that to say this. If they don't win the championship, then you have to have the hard conversation of, do we have to make a massive change to win the championship? That's not unfair. They have the 5th best point differential in NBA history right now. That should be the expectation. And while you are just focusing on Denver, I'm telling I think Milwaukee, assuming Giannis's Achilles is okay, is still very dangerous. But the other team that if I'm Boston, I'm still terrified of is the playoff Miami Heat. And I know every year people are like, no, that's not the Heat. All I know about the Heat is in the last 5 years, they've been to the NBA Finals twice, or in the last 4 years, pardon me, they've been to the NBA Finals twice, and they were a Game 7 Jimmy Butler 3 away from being there a 3rd time. And this Heat team is better. They're not playing Kyle Lowry. The addition of Rozier is good. This team, Hero will be healthy, you would think, is better. So the Heat could be the Celtics round 2 matchup because the Heat can climb up to the 4-5 line. And so that would worry me. But yeah, if Boston doesn't win the title this year, then you look at Tatum Brown and say we probably have to make some type of change. But they're the huge Vegas favorites to win the title. So they should win the title. I don't think they will.
All right. Good to have you back. Hadn't seen you in a while. I mean, there was like a contrail into the studio yesterday as you flew in just in time for the show.
Listen, I did barely make it. The time change is wild from Tokyo. We flew in, I left. It was weird. Yeah, it was crazy, but it was a good time. Saw some castles, did some great history, saw a panda bear, in real life, so it was wonderful. Colin, I'll see you soon. Love you, man.
Nick Wright, going to places I've never even visited. But, hey, I got a lot of time. Or do I? Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.